So it's official. We have a Raiden rerun incoming, and naturally the big question is, should you get her? Thing is, if A's rerun was around the Vaka release time period, for example, I think the answer would be 1000% yes. Because I feel like everyone should actually go ahead and get her if you don't have her because of how well she can battery characters. But this is going to be happening in the next patch that we're talking about. And she's actually going to be sandwiched between the Yae Miko rerun in the form of the Stellar Conduct banner and, of course, Snezhnaya. And for that reason alone, this is going to be one of those rare instances where I, of all people, am actually going to say it's probably a good idea to skip the almighty Narukami Ogosho, God of Thunder. Despite being a big fan of my god, A, truth be told, there is only one team that I play with her these days, and that's of course the Raiden Inquisition. At base, it's just a very straightforward team that's named for having the big three from Inazuma working together to do as much electro damage as possible. But at my investment, with specifically C2 Shillanen, it becomes a really fast team with short rotations and almost second perfect cooldown management and still pretty decent damage that can of course clear content. This is probably the most fun team I actually play. Of course, by the time we see the Raiden rerun, we already have the Miko buffs in the form of the Witch's Revelations, with one of them in particular being turret duration extended to 24 seconds. This change alone pretty much makes the Raiden Inquisition with C2 Shillanen have a lot more breathing room to both make mistakes and also use Shillanen's ult to heal. So at that point, instead of having second perfect cooldown management, we can still keep going with that particular kind of gameplay, or we can just relax a lot more. And you won't need C2 Shillanen anymore to still enjoy using Miko's skill only once per rotation, or like the 3 Miko skills once per rotation, since the turrets themselves will still last longer than the rotation itself. Honestly, the Raiden Inquisition is, I think, the strongest reason to still get A if you don't have her, but besides that, there's actually a surprising amount of stuff to actually talk about with regards to the Raiden Shogun. So before we get into the usual shenanigans of this video, don't forget to like the video and of course subscribe to the channel, because your support will help combat the YouTube algorithm. A's last rerun was in version 5.6, i.e. mid-late Natlan, i.e. Escoffier's release, so it has been a very long time since we saw her banner. So let's go through what's new for the Raiden Shogun. Theoretically, you could use Dahlia in a Shogun team to get more attack speed. Attack speed does make A feel a lot more fun to play, so there's that. You can set up a Lunar Charged Raiden team with Inefa, Aino, or Columbina. I suppose it's possible to fit Yehoda in there as well, especially C6 Yehoda in that team. Filthy Disgusting Heretics love Lauma's release. Overload Shogun mains enjoy the release of Durin and later Nicole. If you're desperate, I suppose you could fit Prune in somehow. It's tricky, but I think you can play a Crystallized Lunar Charge LC Squared team with Linnea. Her Geo App alone seems to be too slow to maintain the turrets though, so maybe if you bring Chiori, that's the play. And Sandy is supposed to be quick swappy, but she also has permanent on-field time as an option, so I'm not entirely sure what we can do with both of them at the present moment. Obviously, I am writing this without Sandy even being available, so we'll just have to see. Apparently her ult can still do some pretty decent damage, so maybe dual carry Stellar Conduct is a thing. We'll just have to see. There's actually 2 new teams to talk about for A, and that's of course the Lunar Charge team and the Overload team. So adding these to, of course, the Inquisition, that means there's 3 teams that I've actually thought about with A. But like I mentioned, it's really the Inquisition that is the team that I still play regularly. But what's nice about Lunar Charged Shogun is that you don't actually have to build any ER on Inefa or Columbina for that matter and still use their ults regularly, which does make this team a rare new addition to the game in that it can actually take advantage of A's main strength, being of course her team energy battery. The demonstration that I'm showing right now in this B-roll footage has a smidge over 135 ER on Inefa and Columbina. On top of that, we're bringing someone like Sucrose, so we can always use her Butterfly ult to extend the duration of at least the EM share that Sucrose has. In fact, as far as I can tell, it seems like a bit over 120 ER on Columbina is enough to still get her ult back in this team. Which, keep in mind, even with her signature weapon, according to KQM, Columbina would still need somewhere around 160 ER as a solo Hydro to get her ult back in teams that don't involve A. So that's a lot of roles and a lot of stats that are being used on ER instead of, let's say, HP, EM, crit. Oh, and by the way, of course, you don't have to use Sucrose if you don't want to. Overvape is pretty good. Shillinen is always goated. Hell, Nicole should work fine as well since she's able to buff A and Anefa's damage, but with the notable loss of Res Shred. Speaking of Nicole, let's turn to the Overload side of things, because like I mentioned, we have the Chevy team with the newly released Nicole and Durin. One of the main advantages that A has in, let's say, a triple pyro Chevy team, as opposed to someone like Clorand, is that A can apply Electro without burning one of her big attacks. I am, of course, referring to using A's skill. Clorand, on the other hand, would need to use something like her ult to get Electro on the enemy before, let's say, Chevy's ult, so that you can get that whole overload thing going on, which is a little bit finnier, can mess with your first rotation. So, to that end, I would say that A is a little bit smoother to play than Clorand in this team. Obviously, all of this goes out the window from the second rotation onwards. Meanwhile, looking at what I'm getting in the Simulacrum, it seems like support Durin, despite already getting a lot of Res Shred from Chevy, is still stronger than DPS Durin in this team. Oddly enough, I get more damage out of Durin in this form as well as getting, of course, more damage out of A. Now, for me at least, Nicole is a fair bit stronger than Fischl in this team for a few reasons. Number one, I haven't farmed a Hexa Scroll set for Fischl, or Durin for that matter, yet. Meanwhile, my Fischl remains level 80 out of 80, and the rotation seems too fast, and I run into a slight cooldown issue, so that's kind of hilarious. It's that kind of thing where both A and Durin's DPS suffer greatly, or with the flip side being that Fischl actually does damage as opposed to Nicole, but that still ends up being a DPS loss for me. In fact, I'm writing the script before the patch drops, which means the Miko buffs haven't shown up yet, and despite the 3-second longer setup and rotation, my Miko right now is still stronger than bringing Fischl, so there we go. But seriously, just put the Nicole in the bag, little bro. She's pretty much the way to go. But what's really interesting is whether you even need Chevy anymore in these Overload teams, because what Chevy brings to the team is plus 40 attack percent, 40% Res Shred, plus 60 Electro and Pyro percent for the on-fielder. But what Nicole and Durin can already give to the team is 600 attack from Nicole, which for R1A is the equivalent of 63.5 attack percent. For R5 Wolffang Durin, that is the equivalent of 70 attack percent. There's also 300 attack for the on-fielder after 3 seconds, so for R1A, that is another 31.7 attack percent, so the total is actually plus 95.2 attack percent, again, as opposed to Chevy's 40 attack percent. There's also 35% Res Shred by triggering overloads while support Durin is active. This is of course in a Hexarray team. And there's also plus 40 Electro percent and Pyro percent while A is on field because we're running Hexa Scroll on Nicole, again in a Hexarray team. So swapping Chevy for Nicole seems to result in a bit less damage percent in favor of way more attack. And that actually results in more damage, actually. And you're not restricted to playing Overload anymore, which means we can play something like Overvape. Now, you could use someone like Xingqiu, who is an attack scaler and thus is getting buffed by Nicole, but it does seem to me like C1R1 Yolande is still better, at least for me. I'm of course comparing her to a level 80 R2 J-Cutter Xingqiu anyway. I did put Xingqiu on Noblesse at least, but his DPS is still nowhere near as much as Yolande's. Meanwhile, we also have Overburn. And for the Emily enjoyers, you can start thinking about not even using her skill anymore after the first rotation, just keep ulting. Chevy Nicole Durin seems to be a bit stronger than Overburn, but I guess the big takeaway is that you can play alternatives to Chevy Overload teams now that Durin and Nicole exist, so go have fun. That's always the main thing on this channel. Building A has gotten a little bit more interesting than I expected, actually, so let's go through it. For weapons, Engulfing remains her best in slot. Low end signature doesn't work because Muso no Hitotachi doesn't count as normal attacks, so you lose the ult buff pretty quickly. And if you actually use her skill at the start of the rotation and then swap to other characters, the entire passive disappears, which means the weapon is pretty damn cooked. Flynn's signature, as far as I understand, actually works on A. The Lunar Charged damage buff will disappear pretty quickly though. The crit damage buff, as far as I understand, actually sticks around in a Lunar Charge team. The energy restore passive, on the other hand, either doesn't work or, in all likelihood, doesn't matter because, of course, this is A we're talking about. Otherwise, 5-star crit statistics like Jade Wing Spear actually work pretty well as well. Sacrifice the Staff is the new 4-star weapon option that you can get from weapon banners only. It has high base attack for 4 stars and thus has low crit rate. It does have a passive at R5 that gives plus 48 attack percent and 36% ER, so as far as I understand that should be pretty permanent since A skill actually hits once every second and this weapon passive actually works off field, so I think this is a new best in slot 4-star weapon, potentially. Let me know in the comments if that's the case. The Battle Pass options also work fine, but barring that, just fish and get the catch, that's pretty much it. I think most Shogun users who are still using 4-star weapons are just using the catch, so there we go, that's basically it. I do wonder how many of us actually have Sacrifice's Staff, especially R5 Sacrifice's Staff. Let me know in the comments if you actually have that. For artifact sets, just stick with EOSF, strongbox it. For artifact stats, ER and attack stands are valid, attack and electro cups are valid, crit hats are pretty much the way to go. The weapon that you use can of course influence which artifact piece you use, so really just test your builds out in the simulacrum and see which one works best. One thing to remember as well is having more ER on A does result in having more energy restored for the team. For my Shogun, I actually can hit 300 ER, or it's actually 299.9%, but who's counting? So after getting the 5 energy restores from Muso no Hitotachi at crown level, instead of getting only 12.5 energy for the team, I would be getting 27.5 energy for the team. And I think that alone is a good enough reason to consider running an ER sand over an attack sand. Sometimes you just don't need to be building for damage, sometimes you can build for utility and that ends up making the team function a lot better. For Constellations, some folks would suggest C3 is quote-unquote necessary from a meta perspective in order for A to still be somewhat competitive. From a strict gameplay perspective, A's Constellations set for C6 are just all DPS increases anyway, so it kind of doesn't matter. C1 is mainly the big thing for the Raiden Inquisition in that you can still get all of A's resolve stacks without needing to use Shilinen's ult. Miko's and Sara's ults at C0 would only give 34 resolve, but at C1 they would give 61.2, which is actually all of the resolve. Meanwhile, in the Overburn team that I mentioned a little bit earlier, we're going from 36 resolve up to 43.2 resolve. Keep in mind you also get some more resolve whenever the team picks up energy particles, so there's that as well. C2 makes A's Boomer Sword ignore 60% defense, often considered a major power spike. Now, I remember seeing her damage just double with this constellation, but I'm probably wrong. KQMs thinks it's a plus 43% personal DPS increase, so there we go. C3 is ult levels, C5 is skill levels, C3 means more Muso no Hitotachi damage, so that's another power spike. C5 on the other hand, doesn't matter. C4 gives an attack buff to everyone after you're done with the Booba Sword. I guess it's still useful, but it's a great big whatever type dealio in my opinion. You really shouldn't also be starting with A's Burst in the first rotation, so this constellation pretty much doesn't work for the first rotation, which I think is kind of cringe. C6 reduces ult cooldowns by up to 5 seconds. Meanwhile, C2 Shilinen reduces ult cooldowns by 6 seconds, so it's kind of hilarious that C6 Raiden Shogun is a little bit less useful than C2 Shilinen. The flip side is that A C6 actually works for everyone, not just Electro characters, but honestly, I can't think of a single team that actually wants this outside again of the Raiden Inquisition. And even then, in order to get full value out of this C6, you actually need to be using Muso no Hitotachi for 5 seconds at least, which is just a little bit longer than what A sticks around for in the Raiden Inquisition with the Sweat Lord rotation at the very least. Considering her queen and second in command, Yae Miko the Wise and Beautiful is about to get a wave of major buffs that make her super strong and interesting to play, I really hope that during Snezhnaya we get another wave of buffs from the Witches of the Hexen Circle that will take A, as well as other characters like Nahida and Lisa, to the next level. Perhaps after then, A's Constellations after C3 can actually mean something, but until then, if you like A, then C0 is really all you need. If you really like A, then C2 is a good stopping point. If you love A more than I do, then C3 is a good stopping point. And if you're willing to take out a new mortgage for the Raiden Shogun, then I'll go for C6. Don't let me stop you.
Now you shall perish.
Look, at the end of the day, I'm still very content and satisfied with my C2 R1 Shogun, but that's of course in the one team that I still play her regularly in. A team that is about to get way more accessible for everyone, of course, with those Miko buffs. So in all likelihood, I'll be playing this team a lot more in the future. For that reason alone, I think she's usually worth it, but like I said, Snezhnaya is just around the corner, and some of us still don't have Yae Miko, so I would probably preference Miko over A at this present moment, thus making it a lot more difficult for me to actually recommend the Raiden Shogun next patch, especially in the second half of next patch. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comments below. How do you feel about the Raiden Shogun in 2026? Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, hope you guys enjoyed. If you liked this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Genshin Impact content, and as always, until next time, I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Illusion shattered. Flash! No turning back. I'm always watching. Right here, right now.
Petty trick.
Shine down. Now you shall perish. Bring it. Quiver. Glory to the Shogun. Effect behold. Emerge. Inazuma shines eternal.
New world that I've longed for.